Hi all, and today I'm going to be talking about Yuri Kochiyama and the Asian American movement. So a bit of background, the Asian American movement, or the AAM, started as a student-led movement for social change and racial justice. So the time before the 1960s, the Asian Americans, they lived under yellow peril, which was essentially maltreatment and abuse against Asian Americans. A few notable examples of those includes the Chinese Exclusion Act, which prevented immigrants from China from coming to the U.S. Another example would be the Japanese internment camp, where during World War II, Japanese Americans were sent to internment zones for the risk of what the U.S. deemed as national security. And in 1960s, we went to war with Vietnam. So those in the AAM, due to the maltreatment of themselves, their parents, and their grandparents, they were staunchly opposed to Western imperialism, and subsequently they were also opposed to the Vietnam War. One notable example of an Asian American activist would be Yuri Kochiyama, who was born in 1921 and died in 2014. She was a Japanese American human rights activist and advocate from Harlem and was born in San Pedro, California. She was the leader of the Asian American movement in New York City, and in 1941, after the Pearl Harbor bombing, her father was arrested by the FBI. He was released a year later in 1942, but died a day after release because of maltreatment by the FBI and his already ailing health. Shortly after his death, Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which started the internment of Japanese Americans inside the internment zones, and the experiences with the maltreatment that her father had with the FBI and her internment in the camps shaped her political worldview. She met her husband in the internment camps, and they married in 1946, and in 1960 they moved to Harlem. So she has a legacy of activism. She collaborated with Malcolm X during a protest in 1963, which was a protest about justice for the 500 or 600 minority workers who were fired from their jobs. And later on, she joined the Organization for Afro-American Unity, the OAAU, and she was also with Malcolm X during his assassination. Later on, she became a Maoist and supported the Shining Path, which was a Peruvian Maoist guerrilla group stationed in Peru. She also joined the Revolutionary Action Movement, or the RAM, a black nationalist urban guerrilla movement which attempted to construct a new ideology based on combining elements of Malcolm X teaching with Leninism and Maoism. She supported victims of what she described as FBI oppression, so people like Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was an African-American activist that was put on death row for allegedly murdering a police officer. And she also was friends with Asada Shakur, an African-American activist and feminist who was granted asylum in Cuba. So that's about it. Thank you.